Have everyone join us today. It looks like it's just a couple of minutes after 2 o'clock. So we're going to go ahead and get started. I see more people are joining, but by the time I get through some of the introductions, then I think we'll probably have the bulk of our audience. So let's go ahead and talk about our topic today. I'm really excited to be hosting a series of webinars that are going to really talk about your business and different ways to maximize, in short, profitability. Some things will be about efficiencies and different ways that we can think about our business. So today, let's get started. I'm Robin Intoe, the Vice President of Aesthetics for Nextech, and we have with us today Jenny Ergensen and Stephanie Peterson. A little bit more about them. Jenny actually is a practice manager at Utah Facial Plastics, and she's been with them for a long time. Not even going to go into how long, and she's been using the Nextech product for quite a few years. And she actually has a surgery center, and she's going to talk to us a little bit more about that as well. And then we have Stephanie Peterson. She also is a practice administrator that works for a facial plastic surgeon in New York City. And they have also been on the Nextech product for many years. And she is going to talk to us as well about an ASC, but from a little bit of a different perspective. So we're excited to actually host this webinar, first and foremost, because we've got experts from the industry that are actually joining us, giving us feedback about exactly what a lot of our practices ask about all the time. They want to hear from other practices, those that are going to share successes and failures, just so that we can take those learnings and how we can adapt them to our businesses. So let's kick it off with a poll question. So all of you that have joined, let's look first at who of you actually have ASCs or are considering opening one. So there is a poll. Go ahead and answer those questions and we'll share those results with everyone. By the way, I forgot to mention, go ahead and put your questions in the questions section. And if we have time, we will focus on answering some of those questions. So again, how many of you actually have an ASC? Okay, 100% of you currently have an ASC. Wow. So that's great. So we have a lot of people on here that actually already have an ASC. So it should be a good interaction at looking at what kind of things that we can do that are cost saving. So let's kick this off and let's start with learning about how we can, save money and what other learnings we can learn about from Jenny and Stephanie. Jenny, you want to share with us some interesting facts that you have about your ASC and how you've run it?
Yeah, we've had our ASC for a little over 3 years now. Started the build 5 years ago, it was happening kind of during COVID. So we definitely learned a lot. I would say we had a lot of successes and some things we wish we had done. As far as our biggest successes, I would say at the time, our surgeons were so busy, they really weren't super involved in putting this together, and that might be, something other people have dealt with. But just having, it sounds like most people already have these, so not a huge issue, but we still use them a lot. We have a consultant group that has really helped and kept us from making a lot of costly mistakes. So I would say that's the biggest thing that was helpful. One thing, and I don't know if the module just wasn't available, but if you're not utilizing the ASC module in Nextech, you really need to be. And being able to set up your preference cards in there. We had them all set up separately, and now we're trying to get everything moved over. And that's giving us way more accurate data. So that is something I definitely wish we did. This is kind of an ongoing process, but just getting bids between the companies on the products that you're purchasing, being able to space out, like we're learning with our P&Ls, okay, let's figure out what our needs are. Let's not buy all the expensive things that we need, in Q1, but just kind of figuring out how to space them out. So our P&Ls are a little bit more stable throughout the year and not fluctuating so much. And that's giving us a better handle on how we're doing in the OR. And then, just getting bids all the time between companies. It's amazing how much things can fluctuate in cost. So yeah, that was huge. I would say the other biggest thing is an OR director is your most important thing when it comes to your ASC, because you can't be there. It's kind of like, for me, it feels like its own little place within the practice, I can't always be super involved. So you need somebody that's really good, overseeing costs, somebody that's going to stay there, keep you accredited. Liability is huge. And we didn't really have a great first one in place. We do now. So that was probably our biggest learning.
Those are great learnings. I just I want to recap that because I think those were great. A consultant group, I haven't heard that as often in the industry, but I think that there's a lot that can be learned from someone that sees what good looks like in a lot of other practices. So that's interesting. Yes, there is an ASC module. Nextech does provide an opportunity for you to have that. That does help you understand your cost of cases. I do like the idea about getting bids. That's fascinating because I think, talking through that a little bit, you do tend to see that there's somewhat of a bidding war, I bet. So good feedback there.
Yeah,
And then an OR,
kind of
yeah, those are,
work them against each other a little bit. So takes time, but
yeah,
yeah.
love that. Great learnings there. Stephanie, what can you tell us about learnings from your experience of building out an ASC?
Sure. My perspective is a little bit different. We've only been in our ASC since January. We actually constructed during COVID. We were very fortunate that the office next to us vacated during COVID, so we got lucky. But very similar to what Jenny said, number one, you should have a consultant when you're doing this. You need help. This is not something you should do on your own. They're very knowledgeable in things that would take you a lot of effort to do on your own. I think that managing your supplies is really important. Managing what you're ordering, when you're ordering, it can really bog down your finances if you're not. So we've kind of taken a stab at what are our seasonal procedures, what comes when, especially with expensive things like sutures. Like, I have a facelift season, and so I try to pay attention to when I'm ordering sutures for facelifts. I don't want them sitting on the shelf if I don't need them. I don't want to invest a ton of money in things that are just going to sit there. So managing our P&L from that perspective, I think, is important. From an accreditation standpoint, I think keeping up on your stuff. There's a lot of stuff that we have to do, and it just seems like it's getting more and more bogged down with paperwork and reporting. And, if you let that stuff catch you, you will be here until midnight for a month before your accreditation. So, making sure your logs are current, making sure you have an OR manager or whoever that's going to watch that stuff and make sure that stuff's getting done so that your staff isn't here, at the 9th hour trying to get all that stuff done. I think that you have to do a financial review periodically, whether you're new at this or whether you've done this for a long time. I think you've got to watch to make sure your costs are in play. And I think that's not just bidding is part of it, but I think it's also looking at your cases. Do you know what your doctor's using? Are his preference cards up to date? Has he changed a technique? Has he changed something that he's using and your OR manager ordered it but didn't update something? And do you really know what your cost is? Is something taking longer than it was taking before? So I think you have to put yourself into a position where every 6 months or so, you're really looking at your cost per case and are you still profitable in that situation, because it can catch you really fast as well. So I think those are the biggest things that we've learned, that are things, hot buttons that we have to kind of keep our fingers on.
I think you bring up a really important point, the cost per case, which I think we're going to actually talk about in just another minute. How do we manage cost per case? But I think just to that end, a lot of practices just find that a very time-consuming component of the business. In fact, a lot of times the consultants for Nextech have actually been in practices and they've talked about that as being an opportunity. But again, it's the lift that it takes to actually do it. And I think having those tools in place and keeping up with it, like you said, Stephanie, are going to be important to that end, but and a very important component. Those are great opportunities for us to kind of glean on. Let's do another poll. So, question, do you allow outside providers to use your ASC? Interesting. We've heard some mixed responses out in the industry. So some providers are looking at that more often than not nowadays. And so looks like not quite everybody's in, but it looks like most people don't. I see a lot of no's. All right, I think we've got all the responses in. So 80% were no, 20% were yes. Okay, good information. I think that's a good takeaway. I think that those of you that are allowing outside providers, be interesting to know if you're just one provider in your practice, or how that happened and if it's been successful. So yeah, I'd love to hear thoughts on that. If you want to put those in the questions or the chat, we can talk about them later if we have time. So let's move on to another question for our experts. What ways have you found that you can reduce costs for your ASC? So Stephanie, let's start with you.
I love this question. I'm a bit of a data nut, and so this kind of goes back to understanding cost. And so I think the biggest way that we have figured this out is know what you use in your OR and know your overhead. And when I say know your overhead, I can tell you how much per square foot my OR costs when it's in use, and I can tell you how much per square foot it costs when it's not in use. I know how much the rent is, I know how much the electricity is, I know how much the cleaning is, I know down to the penny how much everything is. And it was an arduous process. I have a little bit of an advantage because I ran an ASC before this. And so having walked into someone else's ASC and tried to back into this, I have to tell you, was a whole lot harder than actually setting this up, because setting it up, I was starting from scratch. And so we actually have a little database that lives on our server, and it has all of our preference cards in it, and every single thing that we purchase goes in, and we know, does it come in a case? Does it come in a box? I know how much it costs. I know how much everything down to how much a needle costs. How many do you use on a case? How many needles does he use on a rhinoplasty or a facelift? And so we can tell you down to the penny how much a case costs. And so I will say that it was not fun to put it together, but it is. I sleep better at night, and we can sit down and look, and we know at any given time if our ASC is profitable or not, and we know where we can cut costs. My staff was very shocked to find out things that we thought we needed that we really didn't need. We looked at things like reusables versus disposables. There were things that we were buying as disposables that we didn't need to be buying as disposables, that we could purchase as a reusable. So we were able to cut some costs there. There were some things that they were purchasing and only using half and just throwing out the other half. And so they got creative. How can we use the other half of this split sheet? So it was interesting to see my staff really become invested in creative ways that we could not have things not be used inside the operating room. So we looked at, what else do we look at? I have a whole list of things here. I don't want to burden you guys with it. We talked to our vendors about things that they felt like we could purchase in bulk versus purchasing in small. I'm in Manhattan. My OR is a very nice size. My storage is not. So I am very limited into what I can keep in bulk. So we really looked at what makes sense from a bulk perspective versus what does not. And that really comes down to dollar and cents. If something is expensive to keep in bulk and something else is not, then I'm bulking the things that I can save money on. So those are ways that we've learned to keep costs down. And it's really working. Like, I've noticed a big difference, especially in the last 2 months. And we've been able to pinpoint dollars and cents savings, like in the thousands. So it really helps. Know what you have and know what you need.
I think those are good call outs. I think the knowing is a big starting point. If you don't know what the cost is, how do you know where you can reduce or find savings? So those are good call outs. Jenny, you've been doing this quite a while now. So tell us what things you have found that help you reduce costs.
Yeah, I think like Stephanie said, getting staff involved has probably been the biggest thing. We meet, go over the P&L with our director, OR director, and then she's working with her team. We kind of go line by line. And one nice thing, they've kind of found like, okay, what things can we autoclave? What things can we call around and check other prices on? Because it changes a lot, especially post-COVID. It's not like you're just getting a price and it's just going to be that way forever. They're constantly checking on the facelift packs and letting us know and getting excited. Hey, I found out we can get these for half the price. They're great products, So I feel like getting them excited and involved helps, and not just making sure they're not ordering so much that they're also, even though we have more space here, it's still really hard. I feel like storage is always a problem, so we can kind of only order so much at one time. But also one thing that's awesome with the Nextech inventory module, the ASC, is you can actually, because we were having this issue before where, okay, you're adding a pack of 4x4s in inventory. Well, we can't add that to the preference card, but you actually can. You can kind of set it up to where in your preference card, you can have it pull out 4 of those 4x4s, and then you're putting the cost in the inventory module. So it's really giving you an exact amount with your preference cards in the ASC. It's even pulling out staff cost. It's so just really nailing down exactly what each, not just each surgery is costing, but what each surgeon is using with his individual surgery. So then we've got 3 surgeons. They all do basically the same surgery. So we're needing preference cards for all of them. So like Stephanie said, it's super time consuming, but it is absolutely necessary. So that's huge. I found out we were giving like a bunch of, I think it's kind of fun for staff in the OR to be like, oh, we should give people this little thing after surgery and this. And so we have already figured out, okay, we want somewhat of a bougie experience. We will give them a nice goodie bag. It's got an eye mask or a robe with our logo. We're going to build that into the surgery cost. But I found they were giving, like for rhinoplasties, all sorts of stuff patients can be buying on their own. That is what we were doing before. They're not expensive. They can get their own bacitracin. They can get, and so we kind of figured out what makes sense to have the patients buy and what makes sense for us to give them that adds to the experience for them, so that they're, happier and telling other people about it, and but not just things in excess because it's fun. So we kind of put a squash on that, like looking at what they're ordering on Amazon. Does everybody need balloons and lunch on their birthday? You know what I mean? So you really do kind of have to look at a lot of the things. And then kind of that patient turnover. We were finding one of our anesthesiologists was kind of using a cocktail that was leaving patients there for a long time, and they were having a hard time getting them out the door. And that was in a number of ways: staff, anesthesia, supplies. It was just increasing our costs quite a bit. So just nailing that cocktail down and making sure, everybody's doing it. The whole team knows how long, obviously things are going to come up. Safety is first, but as much as you can be watching that, that's been a huge one for us. And so I would say those are most of the things. And I say, you can do everything to reduce cost as much as possible. At the end of the day, utilization is your biggest thing. If you've totally reduced costs to whatever low amount it can be, you're still paying rent. You're still paying to keep the lights on. If doctors are out of town, for weeks, and this is where it's important to be looking if other people can come in, if like we go to another hospital too on certain days. So, okay, we need to start cutting back those days and filling our OR and, making sure our facility fees are adequate.
You both provide a lot of interesting context to this, thinking about just the staff giveaways, that's good. Or they're kind of like those costs that escape you, and they do add up. I love the one about the anesthesia cocktails. It's, more time the patient's consuming the cost of the space, as well as the next topic we're going to talk about, which is staff. So let's do another poll question here. What is your ASC staffing model? So again, interesting question. Are you using all full-time staff? Are you using a mix of part-time and full-time, per diem, some sort of combination? So how do you staff up your surgery center? Looks like looks like we're leading with the combination here. Not everybody does one or the other. Most people are doing a combination here. So it looks like we have almost all the votes in. Yep, all the votes are in, and it looks like it's a combination. So probably a smart way to do it, but let's listen to the experts and let's think about this. How does your staffing impact your cost savings? Jenny, tell us what you got there.
Yeah, I feel like I could probably talk about this one the most, because sometimes staff equals time and time can be cost. But yeah, we use kind of a mixture of all of those, and we've learned as we're growing into our ASC and keeping it utilized as we're switching from other facilities, that having, we're offering full-time positions to staff we know we can afford to keep busy full time. Other than that, we have a lot of per diem or PRN nurses that we're not overpromising hours, because we were finding we would have part-time people. And then if we weren't busy, they were just fine. They were coming in and just like stalking and things that, you know, could have waited. So making sure we're doing some of that. We also had at one point, the OR director was trying to cut costs so low, she wasn't hiring enough. So it was, and then she was telling us we needed to cancel surgeries. So it's kind of like, for us, we have like a big group of PRN nurses that we also give, you know, little goodies to, as far as like Botox and treatments, to kind of keep them on and keep them engaged. But they do have to at least be available for a certain amount of the time that we're asking them. If we've asked them 5 times and they're not available, we're probably going to start moving on. So it's kind of finding that balance that has helped us. Not burning them out has been huge. So that's part of that turnover. If patients are there long and you've got 2, 3 other surgeries going, and your second or third shift is ending up there till 9 p.m., you start losing them, or they don't want to pick up more hours. So we really had to start getting realistic about, okay, how long is this going to take us? Turnover is good. The surgeon's got to be right on how long it's going to take him. If not, he needs to tell us if, you know, he thinks this is going to be longer. I realize it's sometimes going to happen, but that way we can staff appropriately. So we've got that third shift and people aren't burning out. That's helped us a ton as far as our staffing is gone. And again, this all comes down to like the OR director is helping keep these people happy, looking at that, looking at turnover, even just things like there's just so much liability in an ASC, where having the right eyes will bring up issues that could have progressed to a point where it sank you, that we wouldn't have seen when it comes to how medications are handled. Or so yeah, as far as staff, your OR director is the most important. So pay them well, treat them well. And for us, you know, when it comes to, we've kind of heard a lot as far as hiring and everything with local surgeons in the area. There's a lot of turnover, and a lot of these scrub techs and nurses have been unhappy. So treat them well. We hear a lot of horror stories of, you know, surgeons maybe get overwhelmed if things don't go right, or we've heard of them throwing things at nurses, or just kind of burning them out. So it's like, okay, turnover is super expensive. We want you available when we need you. We want you to grow into more time if we like you. So in order to do that, you know, we got to pay you decent, but bottom line, it's like how well we treat you. And we also make our OR team, we work really hard to make them feel like they are rest of the team. They are part of the rest of the team. They come to our activities. We do celebrate their holidays. We do things like that. So yeah, I would say those are the main things. And then, well, actually I had one more here. We also learned too, there's some shifts we could use a scrub tech versus a nurse. So kind of like seeing what exactly needs to be done and what kind of provider you can have for that, because obviously you can pay a scrub tech a bit less. So that helped us too.
Yeah, those are a lot of great takeaways. I think that, you know, the last one I think is probably one of the critical ones that a lot of practices overlook is, you know, leveraging their expertise and where you can use a scrub tech versus an RN. So good call out there. Stephanie, I'm sure you've got some learnings you can share.
Yeah, very similar to Jenny. I will tell you, you got to sit down and look at where you need people the most. Do you have full-time RN? Do you have a part-time? Are they per diem? And we do a combination of that. We do have a full-time RN who works on both our clinic side and in our OR. And we did that because she takes care of our accreditation, but she also takes care of our patients. She does a little bit of clinic patient work as well. And some of that goes back to the experience that we want our patients to have. They see her pre-op, they see her post-op, and so we just kind of wanted that continuity. But I will tell you that one of the ways we have found is that, you know, on a busy surgery day, I bring a medical assistant over to clean or turn over the room, because then my nurse and my scrub tech get to eat lunch. It saves time, and I can sometimes put an extra case on, or I can get that staff out earlier. So we do employ that, especially on busy days when there's multiple cases there. I also use that staff on non-OR days to pick for a case, so that I don't have a high cost nurse or scrub tech in there pulling for a case for the next day. So, I don't have them come in 2 hours before a case to do those things that another trained clinician at a lower pay scale could do. We noticed that when we started doing that over a month, I mean, we're talking, 20 hours of savings of a nurse fee versus a medical assistant who was highly trained, who's been a medical assistant for 30 years. She can go in and pick and pull for a case just as easy as a nurse or a scrub tech can. And that is a significant cost savings to be able to do that. We add staff cost into our cost per case. And in the beginning, you have to add that hour before the case, the time in between the case, and the time after the case, because they're technically paid for the whole time that they're there. So we automatically, add an hour and a half to each case. So being able to shorten the time between cases, being able to have them come in only for an hour before and getting them out quicker, having someone else clean and turn the OR at the end of the day, saved us a ton on staffing. That we were looking at these staff members going, how can we get this cost down? And so we are, and that it's also helping our staff to learn more about the ASC. We have some staff who are now interested in maybe furthering their education and going to nursing school and thinking about, do they want to go to scrub tech school someday and be part of our team? So we're also doing a little bit of development there and bringing some people on board to something that they maybe didn't know they wanted to do, which I think is a little bit serving on both sides. So, and I will tell you that it's something that I look at every single month. I look at the cases, I look at the amount of time they took, and I look at the amount of time each staff person was in the case, because you have to keep an eye on it, because it's very easy to get lax. It's very easy to be at the end of the day and just hang out and take your time. And I find myself going in and saying, hey, great job today. Get out of here, go home. We'll take it from here. Tomorrow's not an OR day. We'll pick up tomorrow. So it's just super important to keep your eye on, again, who do you have? What are they doing? Are they the right person to be doing it? You don't have to have a nurse in there cleaning up. You don't have to have scrub tech in there cleaning up. So pay attention to what you have on your clinic side that can be valuable inside of your OR, doing something that doesn't have to be done by a nurse, because you will find great savings there.
You know what? This is great feedback. I don't think that I could have said it any better or put any more, cost savings into that conversation. I think that both of you hit a home run on it. And a lot of practices have said similar things, and I think it's great to be able to share it out there with our other users. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and close out the session today. We don't have any questions in our chat, but this is a new format for us. And so I want to say thank you very much to both of our experts that joined us today. But I'm also interested in other topics that you may be wanting to hear more about. And we'll bring in experts that can actually support that conversation and provide feedback from these practices. So go ahead and send me an email, send the marketing team an email. You can go ahead and there'll be a follow-up email that comes out to you after this. Let us know what you want to hear more about. We're excited to learn. We're excited to share those learnings with you. So thank you again. Thank you to our panelists, and we will see you on a future webinar.
Yes, here we go.